for it, wait 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 for it. Hey!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Latino Free Minds. I am your host, Gio, and today I have somebody very exciting that has joined us on the podcast. This person was born and raised right here in the Central Valley. Our guest today is a true public servant with decades of experience keeping Fresno County safe. She is the former sheriff of Fresno County. She rose through the ranks to lead one of California's largest law enforcement agencies, earning a reputation for strong leadership, community partnerships, and results-driven law enforcement. Today, she is running for Fresno County Board of Supervisors in District 4, bringing that same steady hand and deep local knowledge to the county's highest policy-making body. Please join me in welcoming a guest that I'm very excited to have on today, Margaret Mims. Welcome, Margaret.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Gio. I'm humbled.
Well, I'm humbled to have you as a guest. I sent you a photo earlier, and I told myself I wasn't going to bring it up, but I feel like I have to bring it up. When I have a certain document that my first time getting was signed by you.
Happy to do it.
You signed my CCW permit, and thank you. I thought it was really cool. I was nerding out, and I was staring at it and thinking, should I send it? Should I not? She's gonna think it's weird. I was like, oh well. So I appreciate you coming on. I know that you are running for the Fresno County Board of Supervisors, which is a very important role in any city or excuse me, in any county, because of the task that supervisors hold in counties here in California. But before we get into that, I want guests to get to know who Margaret is. And while I was researching you, I saw that you were born right here in the Central Valley.
I was.
A native of Selma?
That's right. I was born in Selma. My elementary school years I spent in San Joaquin on the west side of the county. And then my family and I moved into Carruthers, where I went to high school. Most of my life has been in District 4, the district that I'm running for supervisor. And I worked this area a lot. Not only lived and raised here, but as a deputy sheriff, I worked this area a lot in a patrol car. I think I've driven every single road, not only in District 4, but in Fresno County as a deputy. And then I ran the substation out of Selma for a few years. So I'm very familiar with the district, very familiar with the community, a lot of farmers, a lot of business people, a lot of service clubs, and that's going to serve me well.
You know, I also noticed another thing that came up while I was researching you. You you grew up. Your dad was in law enforcement.
Yes. Back in the day, Fresno County had constables and deputy constables. And my dad started off as a deputy a constable in the Kerman Judicial District. And then when we moved to Carruthers, he ran for and won the office of constable of the Carruthers Judicial District. And that all changed in 1973. There was a ballot measure that consolidated the constables with the sheriff's office. So in January of 1973, all of the constables became sheriff sergeants, and the deputy constables became deputy sheriffs. And he passed away, unfortunately, when he was very, very young. He was only 46. However, he did get to see me start my law enforcement career before he passed.
And you started your law enforcement career in Kerman.
Kerman, city of Kerman, January of 1980. I was their first female police officer there. In fact, one of the things that happened as a result of my hiring, all of the badges on everybody wore said patrolman. And so when I got hired, they changed everybody's badges to say police officer rather than patrolman. Uh, so that caused some changes in that city. But I'll tell you, Gio, it's an interesting story. The reason why I got into law enforcement, because that was not my plan growing up.
What was your
My
plan?
plan, yeah, my plan was to be a teacher. I thought I wanted to be a teacher until I worked as a teacher's aide in a second grade classroom. And I figured out pretty quickly that was not going to be my career path. I just changed my mind. Teaching was not going to be in my future. But I worked at this elementary school for many, many years. And I'll tell you that one night I got a call from my father, and he said, I'm going to a retirement dinner. Your mom's got a headache. I don't want to go by myself. Would you go with me? And I said, sure, Dad, I'll go with you. Well, the retirement dinner was for the retiring chief of police for the city of Kerman. While there, I met the incoming chief, and he said words that changed my life. He said, one of my goals is to hire the first female police officer for the city of Kerman. And I told him, Gio, I said, well, if I know of anybody that's interested, I'll let you know. But I was a single mom at the time. I had a son, and I told my dad on the way home, I said, I need a career. I need to be able to support myself and support my son. And I applied for that job. Now, this was in the fall of 1979. So for a police chief to say that at that point in time he was ahead of himself. I mean, he was thinking of the future. And I applied, and I was hired and went to work in January of 1980. Now, I'm a woman of faith. I know that telephone call that night was no accident. It was meant to be. But the family joke, of course, is had my mom not had a headache that night, who knows what the heck I would be doing. But it was a God thing that I got that phone call that night that started my law enforcement career. And when I talk to young people, I tell them, you may know what you think you want to do, but it may not be what you're meant to do. So be open to possibilities, be open to opportunity, and just be very flexible as you're growing up.
I agree, because you probably could have been a high school teacher right now.
Uh,
Eh,
I'm glad I went that night.
yeah, me too. Because we could have had a completely different sheriff. I moved to Fresno in 2008, and I moved away in 2015, but I came back in 2019. I want to say 2019, right at the end of 2019, and something spectacular happened in early 2020. A little thing called COVID-19,
Yeah.
uh, and what better place to be in California, if not in Riverside, then Fresno County? Because if I was in Los Angeles,
Oh my goodness.
I might have gone crazy if I had to live in a different city. Um, but as a sheriff of the county here, when I moved back, I was very excited. Um, not excited. It was a terrible time, COVID. But I was happy that our sheriff decided to stand up to Gavin Newsom and his overreach.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's something that I appreciate as somebody that uh, lived in your county. So thank you.
Well, you're
Um,
welcome. I will tell you that I had to be strong on that because the CAO at the time, our county administrative officer, actually called me wanting me to have the deputies enforce the mask mandates
yeah.
and shut down what they called the non-essential businesses, including churches. And I said, absolutely not. The deputies are not going to go out there and ask people if they have a situation where they can't wear a mask if they're not wearing one. They've got bigger and better things to do than that. And not only that, I did a lot of things as sheriff, but one thing I didn't do, I didn't go out and force people to wear masks. I did not go out and close down churches. It didn't make sense to me that they wanted to close churches but keep marijuana shops open. And it was just it didn't feel right. I knew it was not the right thing to do, so I had to stand up, make a stand.
You bring up something very interesting that I hadn't even thought about until right when you said it. The marijuana shop staying open. Well, you were also the sheriff when the marijuana shops became legal.
Yes.
How was that transition?
Well, it wasn't easy. It was not easy, and I fought against that because I was sheriff when they legalized marijuana for medical purposes. And the problem with that is it listed terminal diseases that people could use marijuana for. And there could be very reasonable accommodations made for somebody terminally ill. But when they started opening up these medical marijuana shops, I drove around and I watched. What we had were mostly young men in their early 20s in line. The line was out the door, and they were riding up on skateboards and bicycles. And I thought, these are not people that have a medical necessity. I mean, they might say their back hurts, they might say they can't sleep, they might say all kinds of things. And it was very easy for a doctor to write a recommendation. But it was not ready for prime time, and it still isn't. If they reschedule marijuana, they might be able to do some more testing to
Yeah.
see what validity it has for medical reasons. Um, but I just said out loud, I said, don't use that as a reason because your back hurts or whatever. Just admit you want to smoke weed. I can deal with that. To be honest about it, but don't make up excuses and reasons.
Yeah, I mean the I don't even know if there was ever a culture shift from uh prior to marijuana being legal and then suddenly it was legal. It just like it was no transition at all. It was just
Yeah.
overnight and people were just making all sorts of excuses. And I remember people saying, "Well, yeah, you just go to your doctor, you tell them your foot hurts or your back hurts and whatever excuse, and they'll just write you the prescription."
Yeah.
Uh
And there were certain doctors that people would go to that just at the drop of the hat. To get a recommendation, doctors were supposed to give you a physical exam. We actually had some undercover officers going into some doctors' offices that were constantly being seen on recommendations and saying, my back hurts, I want a marijuana recommendation. And the doctor would just write it with no exam. So there were some unscrupulous doctors also.
yeah. Yeah, I it, it's something that I mean, I think I was in my early 20s when it became legal for just I guess to sell. But it's never a culture that I was a part of. So I always thought it was weird that we did that, and I always wondered, is there testing for if somebody's under the influence? I mean, I guess you can tell sometimes, but I always wondered, like, is there like a sobriety test for that, or?
Unfortunately, there's not. I mean, you for law enforcement, there are some symptoms that
Mhm.
can be articulated. You know, red, watery eyes, the odor of the marijuana, um, and especially if you're driving, you know, driving erratically. But there's nothing like a breathalyzer without like with alcohol to measure the amount of marijuana that you have in your system. So for alcohol, there's a certain level you can't surpass. For marijuana, there is no way to tell. You can still be convicted of driving under the influence if those symptoms can be articulated by the law enforcement officer, but there's no science to tell a court how much is in your system. That has not been developed yet.
That's interesting to me that they would legalize something without having a method
Right.
to do something like that.
Well, not only that, they don't have appropriate tracking. How does a person know when they go into a shop what's in that marijuana, how it was grown, what pesticides was used, what herbicides were used? There could be all kinds of things in that. And now we're finding fentanyl laced marijuana, fentanyl laced uh, narcotics of every kind. And so that people really don't know what they're buying.
You bring up a great point. I was in a motorcycle accident last year, and I actually had the unfortunate opportunity of being able to um, be under the influence of fentanyl, and that stuff is strong. So somebody to just smoke marijuana, and you don't know who's
No, they don't
putting the
know.
dosage in there. I mean, do, are there cases where people die from smoking marijuana because of the fentanyl?
Well, sure. And most of the time, though, when people die, it's because of pills. You know, the pill factories that bring fentanyl to this country, and then they go through the presses, and it's not consistent. You might have a pill with a teeny tiny mountain amount of fentanyl, and then the next pill has a lethal dose of fentanyl. It is just a horrible thing when people think they're taking one thing, but it's really loaded with fentanyl.
I I remember when we moved back to Fresno, um, in 2019, there was billboards everywhere for fentanyl, and
Right,
um, my son was in school at that time, and maybe this was happening before. I think I was paying more attention because when I came back, my son we left. My son was a baby. We came back and he was in school, so we were being sent the videos from the Fresno Unified School District. Watch this video, so you know that the signs of things to look for with fentanyl, and um, I hadn't realized um, the the seriousness of the fentanyl and the opioid epidemic that was
right.
hitting the United States, and that hit hard here in Fresno, didn't it?
It did. It hit hard. We had several deaths. In fact, our DA was the first DA in the state to successfully prosecute people for selling fentanyl pills that killed people. So they, she was really a leader in that in the state. I'm glad to say. But the young people these days they have things like pill parties where they have a big bowl of pills all mixed up, and they just take them not knowing what they're taking and just seeing what happens. And that's it's so risky. It's hard to tell young people how risky that is. But that's what has started happening, and it's been going on for a while. And it's scary. It's scary for parents. It's scary for law enforcement, and people need to talk to their kids. And it's sad that parents sometimes will just keep naloxone in their home just because they never know.
Is is this
They keep that in their home.
pill part? Is that like a college thing?
High school, high school.
Oh, thanks, Margaret. I have a son going into high school. That's just something to look forward to protecting him from.
Yeah.
So um, that's really scary. Um, I want to rewind a bit, and I feel like I jumped ahead into COVID, but you have a whole career um, that you built up, and I find it so interesting that you uh, you mentioned that you were gonna you wanted to teach, and you walked into that second grade classroom, and you decided that wasn't for you. I just how how did you go from not wanting to take care of a classroom to then I I don't know if I should say this, but I thought of it when you mentioned the second grade. I was like, oh, so you went from in my head. I was like, she went from babysitting second graders to babysitting people in county jail. I want to talk about that lead up because
Yeah.
you were, if correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the first female sheriff of Fresno County.
Yeah.
But
Yes, that's
before
correct.
that, there's a whole career before that.
Yes.
So let's
So
go down that.
sure. So I worked for Kerman for almost 4 years. They put me through the police academy. I owed them a significant amount of time for taking a chance and hiring me, putting me through the police academy training, and I worked there for a good long time. Um, but it's a small town, and it was much smaller way back then. And I knew I wanted to work for a bigger agency, and the sheriff's office was the agency I wanted to work for. So I applied for the sheriff's office, and I was hired in August of 1983. Started off as a deputy sheriff. I worked a lot of patrol, a lot of patrol. I worked detectives working property crimes, burglaries and robberies, and I did that for a while. And I left the detective position to be a canine handler. So I had a dog for 2 years. I was the first female canine handler for the sheriff's office. And I had a great dog. He was a shepherd. His name was Justice, and he was a great dog. And we worked swing shifts a lot, and that was a that was probably the most fun assignment that I had in the whole career, working with that dog. He was a great partner. And it was before Fresno PD had canines. And so the sheriff's office would get called whenever they needed a dog. And so we would fill and go and work Fresno PD cases with our dogs when they needed one. So it was just a lot of fun. And after that, I ended up, I was promoted to sergeant. And again, I worked field patrol. And it was interesting in law enforcement that women were kind of put where people thought they belonged. So there had been female sergeants before, but they put them in working with juvenile crimes or working sexual assaults. They had never worked a patrol supervisory job before. And I went to patrol as a sergeant and was the first female sergeant to supervise patrol units. And that I was tested. I admit I was tested, and I proved myself. But that's a fun time. I think the canine was the most fun. The sergeant, I think overall, was really the best assignment that I had. It was a good thing to be a patrol sergeant and cover a lot of people, a lot of area, and involved in training new deputies. That was a good assignment. And then I wanted to promote further, and I became a lieutenant in 1998. promoted to lieutenant, and I was assigned a command. I was given the Selma substation to run, and I did that for many years and worked a watch commander's desk. In the watch commander's desk, that position is you're like the sheriff of the county during nighttime, and when the sheriff's not there, you run the county. I mean the whole county with the sergeants that are on duty. And then in 2005, I was promoted to captain, and I was assigned to the jail. Now, I had never worked in the jail before I was promoted to captain. I would arrest people and take them and drop them off at the jail and then leave. What happened after that, I didn't know. And so I learned an awful lot as a jail captain. That it's a whole different career path for many people. It's a whole new profession rather than be a deputy sheriff. And I learned a lot, and I'm really glad I did that job because it prepared me to be the sheriff and be in charge of the jail. And then in 2006, our then sheriff, Richard Pierce, came in. And at that point, I had promoted to assistant sheriff. And he said, I'm not going to run again. I'm going to retire. And again, I go back to that Kerman story when that door of opportunity opened, when I met that incoming chief, and he said, I'm going to hire my first female police officer. That was a door of opportunity. Now another door opened in 2006 when the sheriff said he was not going to run again. So I threw my hat in the ring. There were 5 people in that race. I prevailed in the primary, and at the time, nobody got 50% plus 1 of the vote. So we went to a runoff in November, and I won and took office in January of 2007. And I did that for 16 years, 4 terms. I did that. Now, after my first election with 5 people, I ran the other 3 times unopposed. So I'm telling, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. I mean, the job is hard enough without having to campaign all the time, but that's what's required. But as time went on, the sheriff, it was not just the sheriff. After a few years, they consolidated the sheriff and the coroner's office. So I became the sheriff coroner. And then after a few more years, they consolidated the public administrator job. Now, the public administrator handles estates if somebody passes away with no trust or will. And it's also an elected office. So that at the time, the sheriff, and still is the sheriff, coroner, and public administrator. That's 3 elected offices that the sheriff holds in Fresno County. I told Sheriff Zanoni the other day, I said, we were the Marco Rubio of Fresno County. You have all these jobs and responsibilities, and they're big responsibilities, every single one of those offices.
Yeah, I'm shocked, and as you were going through that, it made me think of something. You were the sheriff through a lot of big shifts. We talked
Yeah.
earlier about the marijuana dispensaries and the um, transition of doing that. But you were also a sheriff in the 2000s when the federal government told California that the prisons were overcrowded.
Yes.
So you got to experience the transition of um, prison population coming back out onto the streets, prison closures, and I'm sure your jail being a little more or more populated than it should have
Yeah.
been.
Yeah.
How was that transition?
It was very difficult. So that happened in 2011 when they called it realignment. And what happened is they didn't open the back door for state inmates to leave at that time. They just closed the front door. And they said, okay, nobody is going to prison anymore if they're convicted of any offense that you get a sentence for more than 1 year. Before that, If you were sentenced for anything for more than a year, you went to state prison. So after realignment, if you were convicted of a non-serious, non-violent, or non-sexual crime, you did all of your time in a county jail. It could have been 20 years. So here now local jails who were built to hold sentenced inmates for only a year are now receiving inmates that are staying multiple years. And they were just never built to do that. And of course, we in the Fresno County Jail, they can't be overcrowded. We are under a federal consent decree that prevents the jail from being overcrowded. So there are releases that have to happen. And when realignment happened and more inmates started staying in local jails, those releases had to happen more often. But the state could have done so many other things. The reason why they had realignment is the state lost a lawsuit that said they weren't providing adequate health care because they were overcrowded. And so rather than build more prisons and spread inmates out so they weren't crowded, they shoved the responsibility down to counties. And it really was a big impact on the jail and probation. So parole officers, their workload was cut like down by about 20% because those inmates that came out that were convicted of the non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual assault were supervised by probation rather than state parole. And so they really pushed a lot of responsibilities down to counties, and it was very difficult.
And that didn't stop because, as far as I'm aware, California still hasn't built any prisons, right?
Oh no, they closed prisons, Gio. They closed the prison in Kalinga. There and the Governor Newsom, has said he's going to close more prisons. It's not about public safety; it's about money and expense. That's what they're worried about, and it's wrongheaded.
Yeah, so that happened in 2000. It started in 2011, and then 2014, um, another law came into place that
Prop 47. Yeah.
Prop 47. I mean, as you're dealing with all this, the Attorney General was Kamala Harris, right?
Yes, she wrote the title and summary to Prop 47, and
Right.
she called it the Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act. And
Oh,
it,
that sounds
yes,
nice.
yes, doesn't
Tell me
it?
about the safe schools.
Well, and people voted for that. And what happened is it really reduced felonies to misdemeanors, many felonies to misdemeanors, and most of them drug crimes. Now, the sad thing about that was if somebody was convicted of a drug crime and it was a felony, they would go to court and they were told, look, you get into a program and you are successful, we take the felony off your record and reduce it to a misdemeanor so you don't have a felony. And then after Prop 47, that changed. All those felony drug charges were now misdemeanors. There was no place to bargain for DAs. And people would say, well, I can live with a misdemeanor on my record. And so it really got rid of the opportunity for people to voluntarily go into programs because they had a felony hanging over their head. That went away. And that's also about the time you saw the homeless population explode.
Yeah,
Uh,
I remember that because I was one of the weird 20s, early 20s weird person that would listen to the radio, and they were talking about um, people were being bussed into California, or there were states on the East Coast that would bus their homeless to California, or give them a one-way ticket to California. And who wouldn't want to come to California? I mean,
right,
being
right. They
homeless
could
in the sunshine is amazing.
they could be homeless in the sunshine, use drugs. It's only a misdemeanor if they got caught. And the homeless encampments. I mean, that's another issue we can talk about. It's not compassionate. The the assaults, the drug use, the theft, the things that happen in drug encampments are just it's a very sad situation. Not to mention the blight those encampments start in neighborhoods. One thing we figured out is that you just can't let them get established. You have to keep them moving. And at the same time you clear out the encampments, you offer all the services that they could possibly want. There's housing, there's drug abuse counseling, there's alcohol treatment, there's all kinds of services that they can get, but they very rarely take advantage of them because when they go into these facilities, they have to obey the rules. They can't drink, they can't use drugs, and it's not a place they want to stay. So it's sad, but we just have to really try to keep them moving so that it doesn't establish the neighborhood blight and the crime problems just get worse and worse. Not to mention the hygiene issues that these encampments cause.
You know, you bring up um, you make me think about what happens when there's crime committed by the homeless, who, you know, in my experience with homeless, you know, I have empathy, but a lot of them are on drugs. I've
Yeah,
seen them here in Fresno, and there's issues, meth and different things,
which
and
cause
it's
mental health issues.
yeah, causes mental health issues, and then when they commit a crime, they go to county jail.
Yeah,
So now you have to deal with that inside of your county jail that you're in
yeah.
charge of. How
And it's
how
a
does that
very
add to the stress?
well, it does because in legal terms, it's called a special relationship. When somebody goes into jail, a special relationship is established, and the sheriff is personally responsible for what happens in the jail. And so, if we don't classify somebody appropriately, or um, the treatment that they require is not provided, the county gets sued, the sheriff gets sued. And so we have to really make sure that we take care of the inmates because of the liability if it doesn't happen. And I'm really proud of where we went with the jail. When I first became sheriff and started in the jail, after a while, we did get sued for not having enough personnel and for medical and mental health treatment. And the reason was we just didn't have enough budget. You know, I would go to the board and I would go to the CAO and say, look, to provide the appropriate level of care that we're required to, this is what I need in the budget. And it was always short. And so when the lawsuit came about, I was able to go to the board and say, see, this is what happens when you don't have the money to do what you're supposed to do. And we went from being sued for having inadequate medical and mental health care. And we developed a program with a medical care and mental health care provider. And when I left, we had a nationwide accredited mental health and health services jail. We were accredited nationally and met those standards. So we did a lot of good work. And it's one of those things where I, a lot of people will say, just lock them up and throw away the key. But people are in jail and eventually they're going to come out. And most of the time, they don't come out better than they went in. And we were trying to make them better than when they went in, healthier. That's for sure. And it's not a healthy population. So by making that happen, I think we did the right thing. It's extremely expensive. It's over $16,000 a year per inmate for medical care, our medical and mental health care, and that's a lot.
I think that's more than that might be more than what I pay for medical and for the family.
Yeah.
Um, wow. Well, I mean, I assume there's other. Um, I assume because you're in jail, there's the mental health is it's much more serious. I don't know. It just seems really expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's very expensive. It's a difficult population. It's a ill population. And one of the things also that we did that was important was I was speaking one time to our director of behavioral health in the county, and I said, "Has anybody ever reconciled the people in jail that are getting mental health treatment to the people who are not in jail getting mental health treatment?" And she said, "No, I don't think we've done that." And so her department did that reconciliation. And what we discovered is people in jail that were receiving treatment, once they got out, they weren't. And so I thought, that's not right that somebody has to go to jail to get the mental health treatment that they need. And they started what they called a continuum of care, where now when somebody got released from jail, they made contact with them when they were out to see what services they could provide. So it seems funny for a law enforcement agency to be responsible for that, but that's the way it is in California. Sheriffs run the jails and are responsible for all of that.
You know, that's not this is not the first time that you've brought up a program um, that went beyond um, the duty that you were asked to do. The first time I met you in person, you had mentioned the sheriff's posse
Yeah.
and how that came about, and uh, I I would love to hear that again.
Okay. You're talking about the reading posse?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm a reader. I love to read, and I can't imagine a child growing up not learning how and not enjoying reading books. And so I was talking with a friend of mine in my office one day, and we were, talking about root causes of crime. And she was very familiar with the education system, and she said literacy is a big deal. So I did some research, and what I found out is 80% of the people nationwide in prisons are illiterate. And so I called our probation chief at the time and I asked her, I said, what's the reading proficiency of the kids that are in our juvenile hall in Fresno County? And she told me they read 3 to 5 grade levels below where they should be. So it stands to reason to me, if you could improve literacy, you could reduce crime. And I started the Sheriff's Reading Posse. And I approached, then it was Larry Powell, who was our superintendent of schools, and I said, I need help with this. I had three things. I said, it has to be easy. I can't have deputy sheriffs asking the reading proficiency of kids or trying to determine that, and I have no money. So how do I make this happen? So he said, we can help you with that. And they were able to get us started with donated books, brand new children's books, donated. We kept in nice canvas bags and in the trunks of the patrol cars, as well as our community service officers and our jail lobby and our sheriff's office lobby. And anytime any of our personnel came across a child, they would take out their canvas bag with these books in it and have them pick out the book. Now, that was important because a fifth grader may be reading at a second or third grade level, and they would choose an easier book and say things like, oh, my little brother would like this. And so we let them choose the book, but inside every single book was a library card application and crime prevention material, like bicycle safety or stranger danger material. And the little stick-on badge, we'd put them inside these books. And so it's something that's hard to measure, but it was very satisfying for our personnel to have a positive contact with a child in our community. It really sent two messages. First of all, a positive contact with law enforcement. And second, the message that reading is important. And it might be a first time a book has gone into a home. People are just trying to make ends meet. They're not thinking about buying books for their kids. Or taking them to the library, and they got to keep these books. And since we've given away thousands and thousands of books all donated. None of them were purchased, all donated. And they aren't just any books, they are books that are actually on recommended reading lists for schools. So I love that program. It's something very personal to me, and I think it's making a difference.
I it really touched me when you talked about it, and it really opened my eyes to the illiteracy rates that we have. I went home and I was like, "This is terrible." What she said 80%, and I looked it up and I started digging like, "What's the Latino rate?" And I that night I made a video and I was like, "Guys, this is sad. Like, what are we doing? Like, we
Yeah.
got to do better. Like, prepare our kids better because we want to have a brighter future. This is where it starts. We need to read."
You said something that made me think of something additional. We had books in Spanish and we had books in Hmong as well.
Oh
So
wow.
we made an effort to make sure that happened.
Yeah, and for those that are not in Fresno County, we have a huge Hispanic and a huge Hmong population here in Fresno County.
Yeah.
So that is important. Um, so thank you for sharing that. I thought it was important, and I think that for parents in the community, um, obviously, as a parent, I love when my kids wanna read a book and they're like, "Dad, can we buy some books?" I get excited, but, maybe think about, with the book fairs going on at school. I know sometimes if you ask the librarian, they'll have, where you can donate so that other kids can have books
Yes.
because it's important. I mean, our kids and kids in our community, they have to be able to read, and if we do just a little bit to help others in that area, it helps down the line because it's
Yeah.
like you said. I mean, if you don't know how to read, then what do there's only so much that you can do. Um, so shifting back into um, your progress so we were in the 2000s when the shift happened in the jails, and you know I think one of the things that we didn't discuss, and I don't know how this happened, but I know at some point in the 2010s, I think it was, there was a shift from the state on how things were categorized, and maybe that had to do with the 2014 law changes, um, and maybe some of the statistics started to change in California that made it look like crime rates were going down.
Well, felonies will go down when you make them misdemeanors, that don't they? that's that's exactly what happened. It showed lower felony rates because they made so many felonies. They changed the laws and made them misdemeanors. California is just going in the wrong direction. And then they passed so many laws, like now there's elder release out of state prisons, and you're considered elderly when you're 50 years old. And so that you can get paroled, even though you may have been sentenced for many, many more years. You can get paroled through elder parole when you're 50 years old. And these days, 50 is not elderly.
No, I mean, it was I don't think 50 was old 20, 30 years ago yet. I mean, my grandparents were older than that when who I considered old at the time, but no, I don't think that 50 is old. So when somebody like David Allen Funkston came up for parole and they granted it, I thought there's no way the governor's going to sign off on that. And
And he
then
did.
and he did. Thankfully, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department had something to charge him on.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's gone since then.
I don't either, but when we get notices, or when the sheriff's office gets notices of people being released, and we know they're going to go out and caper again, we'll put somebody and follow them and just wait for them to commit a crime, because it's just a matter of time.
You know, there's there's a lot of respect for sheriffs here in the Central Valley. Um, but I know growing up, I grew up in Sacramento. Um, I think there's a in certain communities there's a bad. Mm, I don't want to say like a bad image, but there's almost like a level of disrespect towards law enforcement, um, which I think that I experienced when I was younger, up until probably middle school. Um, I had older brothers that were into trouble. I might have been going on that path, but while I was in middle school, um, we had a sheriff's substation on campus, and they started a program, uh, a JROTC program through the sheriff's department. And I think for Sacramento, it was probably one of the first. Um, and that was, for me, such a great experience. One, I didn't have to um, leave school at a time where people are hanging around that I don't want to ride my bike past, or um, but also being able to um, have something to do. Like, we would do PT, we would do or physical training, for those that don't know what PT is. Um, we would like run for an hour, and for me at that time, like I'm not in the shape I was in then. um, but to be able to do that, we would do certain drills. I can't even remember the names of them. It's been so long. But I remember we also went on field trips, and they would bring the jail bus, and we would all get in the bus. And there was one time we went to the county jail in Sacramento, and we got to sit in the courtroom. I remember on the drive to the jailhouse, every car we drove past, all the adults were like pointing and laughing, and I was like, "You guys are terrible." That's a good way to deter those kids. It was a little bit embarrassing, but yeah, we got to the courthouse. We got to see uh, what it was like to be in court, to see the proceedings. We got to go into the judge's chambers, which was super interesting. And then we went into the what do they call it? The drunk tank?
Oh, the
The,
holding cells.
the
Yeah.
holding cells. We went to the holding cells. We went into dispatch. We saw so much, and for me, it was such a great experience to go through that. And I mean, for me, it completely changed my perspective on law enforcement. But have you experienced that, where there's certain communities, or certain, maybe certain people in the community that just have a different level of respect than what um, most people that are most people that are watching probably
Yeah.
think of with law enforcement?
Yeah, probably the biggest group that have the highest level of disrespect are gang members. You know, um, the culture, and sometimes, many times, unfortunately, it's multi-generational. In fact, at one time in the jail, we had a grandfather, a father, and a son all in jail at the same time, and their gang membership was generational. Parenting is so important, and the example that you set, and people that you come across in your life, like for you, the ROTC program, and the people involved in that. Look at all the things you learned other than the justice system. You learned discipline, you learned respect, you learned teamwork, and you learned all kinds of things that were kind of collateral to the real world experience in the jail and the courts and dispatch. So that's so important for young people. And in fact, our sheriff's office does have a cadet program for young people from ages of about 13 to 18, 17, 18 years old, where you can come and you can learn about the sheriff's office. And in fact, many people will be involved in that and decide, no, law enforcement is not for me. And that's okay. I'm good with that. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not. So, but young people do get involved in that, and they learn some really good things. There's actually competitions between cadet programs in different sheriff's office and police agencies, where they will have like crime scene investigation or a shooting. They will actually go out and shoot competitively, and it's a little group of people that we try to develop our own, try to grow our own and get them interested and win their hearts and minds. And someday maybe they want to come and work for the sheriff's office.
I love the interaction with the community. Um, I think that it's very important. Um, and now you're retired from the sheriff's department, and um, I am curious because you are uh, coming up for you are running for a new role as the County Board of Supervisors in District 4. What made you decide to step up to that role?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about my many decades of public service and problem solving and working in the sheriff's office. And I was retired for 3 years, and I was really happy to be retired until Buddy Mendez, there was a current supervisor, said that he was not going to run again. Now, the Board of Supervisor position is the only other office I was ever interested in running for. But I thought Buddy was going to run again. I thought he was going to be there for quite a long time. But he's stepping down. And I go back to that door of opportunity in Kerman, that door of opportunity to run for sheriff, and now a door of opportunity has opened up for me to run for supervisor. And I can take all of that experience that I learned as in the sheriff's office, all that experience working with other county offices and department heads and board of supervisors and county administrative offices, and what a great fit it is for me to move into that office of District 4 supervisor. I just will be able to go to work on day one and make a difference. And that's what I really missed. I missed public service. I missed problem solving. I missed working with our community to make it better. There's nothing like it. And it truly is a calling. And that calling has not stopped for me.
Can you tell us about District 4?
Yes. So District 4 is basically the bottom strip of Fresno County, and it veers northeast. So from Coalinga on the west to Orange Cove on the east, and it includes 9 incorporated cities. So it's a district with the most incorporated cities. There's 9 of them, and it includes Coalinga, Huron, Parlier, Orange Cove, Reedley, Sanger, Fowler, Selma, and Kingsburg. So I'll be working with all of those incorporated cities, and it's the only district in the county that doesn't touch a part of the city of Fresno, but it's got 9 other cities in it. So, and it's a big agricultural area, and very diverse. So the communities on the west side, for instance, will have water issues. Our communities on the east side, not so much. They've got the Kings River running through there. So it's very diverse. Every single community and city. I mentioned 9 cities. There's also 9 unincorporated communities like Riverdale, Lanier, Carruthers, Raisin City, Del Rey. I've worked in all of those areas, and they all have their different needs, different leadership groups. I've been exposed to all of their leadership groups. For instance, in Carruthers, you want something done, the movers and shakers are the Fair Board. In Selma, it's the Rotary Club. In Layton, it's their Lions Club. It's every community you need to know who you can go to make things happen. And they're all different. And I've been exposed to all of that.
Wow. And for those that don't know, what what does uh, what does the Board of Supervisors do?
Oh, great question. So the main job every year, the Board of Supervisors have to set the county budget. So that happens. We actually changed. Used to happen in June where they would finalize the budget, but they moved it September to have the budget hearings to take effect October 1st to match the federal budget. Because in June, you really didn't know federally what was going to happen, what money was going to be coming in. And it was just kind of a big guess. And so now they finalize it in September to take effect October. So that was a good move. That's the number one job for the board members as far as big responsibilities. Next, they set policy for the county. So all county policies are approved of by the Board of Supervisors. And thirdly, and what I think is most important, is constituent services, being available and being able to solve the problems when people call in for zoning issues, potholes on their streets, um, neighborhood issues, water issues. That the constituent services is a really day-to-day responsibility of Board of Supervisors.
I'm glad you went into depth there, because there's a lot of times I'll admit, that when we are voting for these things, I kind of think like, is this even important? What is this even doing? And one of the things that we've been doing at Latino Free Minds, the last 3 years, is helping people realize what these roles are doing. One of the things that we started saying very early on is, when we go out to vote, yeah, having our choice of president, that's great. That's important. But more important is what's happening right here locally.
Exactly.
Um, y- when this is what affects us, right? You know, the community trusts Margaret Mims. The community knows Margaret Mims. So when we go out to vote, and we're wondering like, well, what does the county board of supervisors do? Well, now we know, and we know that Margaret Mims is on the ballot. So in case you were thinking of tossing that ballot out, you can go, you know, pull it back in.
Please vote.
If you
Please
threw it away,
vote.
you better just go down to the elections office and vote in person.
Right.
But if you had it and you thought, ah, I'm not, I don't need to do this. This is just primaries. No, open it up. Margaret's on there. Margaret Mims is on there. And there's a lot of other important things on there too. Up and down the ballot. Um, and it's funny because um, when I voted, I've been so in tune, and I think I've been guilty of this at when like a presidential election. I'm so in tune to who's going to be our president, make sure I make the right choice. And this time around, it was at governor, state
Right.
treasurer. So I knew all of those choices, and then I got the ballot and I filled those in, and then I was like, "What's this other page? Oh man, I gotta start to research who all these candidates are." And I start to like dig online. I'm like, I can't find anything on these people. Their Facebooks don't show me anything important. Uh, so then I end up finding articles and endorsements, and there's Margaret Mims name everywhere. I'm like, well, if Margaret likes this person,
That's
um,
that's very humbling. And you know what's important to me, Gio, is to be worthy of the trust that people have put in for me. I just feel that responsibility so deeply, to be worthy of any respect or good thoughts that anybody has of me. And I work very, very hard. There's no other way for me to work except work hard. I see your sign behind you, and that's so important for anybody in public office to remember.
I agree. That sign is for me, to remind me to work hard and stay humble. Um, but I like when guests notice it because they're like, yeah, that's how I work too.
Yep.
Um, and I can see that, Margaret. I can see that you work hard. Um, I can't say, even though you made it sound like the the journey was easy, right? Because you compacted all that into less than 1 hour. I know that it was hard work, right? And dedication that allowed you to continue to move through those doors that just happened to open up for you. And it's not that those doors were just wide open. It's that somebody decided, finally there's somebody here that is ready to
Yeah.
take the next the next step, and I can now step down and Margaret can take over this opportunity. Because there's a lot of times I see with leaders that they're afraid to let go because they're
Right.
afraid that the next person is not going to be able to take on that duty. And you've done so, and you've done it, and you've done it so well.
Well, thank you.
So this next stage, I it I have to admit that I don't live in that area, but for those that do, I I highly recommend filling it out right now for Margaret Mims. And those that don't, if you are in the Fresno area, make some phone calls to those friends that live out there. And if you don't live in Fresno, if you're in Sacramento or San Diego and you know somebody that lives in Fresno, make some phone calls and be like, "Hey, I just watched this interview with somebody named Margaret Mims. You heard of her?" And if they don't live in her areas, you should start making some phone calls there in Fresno.
Make make some phone calls, spread the word. So far, there's very low turnout, and this will probably be a very low turnout election. But I can't emphasize enough that in local races, especially, every vote really matters. Really matters. And, I've said this before. I've had people call me wanting me to run for Congress or wanting me to run for state office and didn't interest me at all. It just didn't. Local public service is where it's at for me. That's where you can really make a difference.
I agree. That is where you can make a difference, and it is important, and this is why at Latino Free Minds we make such a big deal about the position like the governor's race, because we want you to get excited to go and vote, and when you're there, you're like, oh, they tricked me. There's a lot more to vote for than just the one. um, but in all seriousness, I mean these are all positions that need to be filled and filled with people that are able to do the job well. Um, that's important for us because I hear a lot of people complaining about things going on um, all over California, and I'm like, well, what are you doing locally? Who are you supporting locally? Who's in the in the county board of supervisors? Who's in the school board? And they go, I don't know. But those are the things that affect you the most.
Right.
You complain about your kid's school. Don't you pay attention to the school board? Do you go to the school board meetings? Are you interested in that? I mean, it's not for everybody, but if you feel like that your local community leaders aren't doing the job that they're supposed to do, then you have to get involved. You need to go vote. You need to get a little bit more informed, which I know is difficult. But if you do that, you're gonna feel better about your local community. You're gonna feel like you did your part, and I feel like that's where where you put in when you put in the work, right? If you go help somebody on their campaign, you go knocking door to door. When you put in that work, you start to feel the return on your investment in the community.
Yeah.
You see that, Margaret. I want to give you the opportunity to talk to those voters in District 4. Um, let them know as long as you need. If you had to summarize why they need to go and vote for Margaret Mims, this is your chance to tell them.
Thank you. And it's such an honor to be able to run for this office for District 4 Board of Supervisors. And I want to assure the communities out there and the voters out there that I will do nothing short of working very, very hard to make your lives better. That's going to be my goal. Make sure we take care of public safety so that you and your children and your family and your businesses and your farms are safe. Make sure that the ag economy is taken care of here in Fresno County because it's such a bonus to our economy. And it's not just the farmers, it's our farm workers, it's our truck drivers, it's our packing sheds and the workers that work in those packing sheds. You know, my first job was picking grapes in the field just outside of Carruthers. And I know how hard that work is. And when we picked grapes for 7 cents a tray and a penny a tray to roll them up. And it was very hard work. And but it taught me very valuable lessons. And protecting the farm workers and our economy and the farmers are so important. And then finally, to make sure that Fresno County as a whole, every department remembers who they're working for. They're working for you. They're working for the public. They're public service agencies. That's what county government is all about. And I would be honored to have your vote and humbled that you put a mark by my name on your ballot in District 4 for Board of Supervisors. And thank you so much.
Well, Margaret, I thank you so much for the opportunity of being able to talk with you. I myself am humbled at this opportunity. Um, I like I said earlier when we opened up, I'm a huge fan of the work you did as sheriff. I'm a huge fan of you because you were the first sheriff to sign off on my concealed carry permit. Um, and I know that maybe that leads me into this interview with bias, and let it be that way. I don't care. Let them say what they want to say. Uh,
Uh,
but I truly appreciate you coming on, and I um I ask that everybody that has not decided watch this interview, share this interview, um, really consider Margaret Mims. You have my full endorsement. You have the full endorsement of Latino Free Minds, and we wish you the best of luck on in this race. Um, I also would like to, um, before we close out, we always close out with a prayer here on Latino Free Minds. Um,
great.
so if that's okay with you, I'm gonna remove my
Absolutely.
hat.
I believe. I believe.
I'm gonna remove my hat out of respect. Thank God, this time I had my hair brushed. um, so, Heavenly Father, we come before your throne. We thank you, Lord, for this day, for the opportunity to be able to share this space with our listeners, the future listeners that might be coming on later. And I thank you, Lord, for allowing me the opportunity to invite Margaret Mims and allowing her the time to be able to join us, to be able to share her story, her experience, and why she is a great candidate uh, for Board of Supervisors. I ask you, Lord, to bless the next few days as she leads into the election on June 2nd, this Tuesday. Um, to let it be a good result for her, if it is in your will. For those voters that haven't gone out to fill in their ballots, to give them the discernment to consider the candidate that is right for their area, and all of those races that are being run in California. To bless those races and give us the leaders that we need here in California to turn things around, because we hear so many complaints, Lord. I know that you hear them and you know them. I ask you, Jesus, to please please have mercy on us and allow us the opportunity to be able to improve our state. In Jesus' name, I pray and we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Margaret, thank you so much for joining, and all the watchers, thank you. Please remember to share. And we'll have some clips up tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of clips for candidates that you have been watching over the last few weeks. Be sure to share all the ones of the candidates that you love, especially Margaret Mims. Um, thank you, and tune in next week.